The journey first began in 1610 when Galileo turned his newly developed telescope on the planet Jupiter and saw that there were moons orbiting the planet. Until that time, everything was assumed to be orbiting the Earth being the center of the universe. We now know that that was completely wrong, and that was the first major step in this journey of discovery that continues. Today, the latest journey, step in the journey is what's on Mauna Kea. That is the Subaru telescope, the Gemini telescope, the two Keck 10-meter telescopes are the current generation of seeing the most distant objects and the faintest objects that have been seen. And have been major discoveries using the telescopes on Mauna Kea. For instance, it has been discovered that there's a massive black hole at the center of the Milky Way galaxy. 4 million suns of mass are in that black hole. That was a prize-winning discovery. Another prize-winning discovery is that the universe is expanding at an accelerating rate, indicating there's some form of dark energy, and it's called dark energy because we can't see it, we don't know what it is, but there's no doubt that there is something pushing the universe apart at an increasing rate. Why do we need still another generation? We need it in order to see the very first stars that formed in the universe 13.4 billion years ago. We believe that's when the first stars were created and there was first starlight. But it's very faint because it's very far away. And we also know there are lots of planets orbiting other stars in our own Milky Way galaxy. And they have many planets orbiting the stars, but they're very faint because they're small. And so again, we need to collect even more light than the mighty telescopes on Mauna Kea do today. And that's where the 30-meter telescope comes in. Its mirror is 3 times the diameter of the Keck mirror. 30 meters, that's 98 feet compared to the 10-meter of Keck telescopes. That factor of 3, though, in the diameter means 9 times more light is collected because that's 9 times more area. And that light is focused on a spot on the camera of 1/9 the area. So it's 81 times brighter with a 30-meter telescope than it is with the Keck, which is currently the best in the world. That factor of 81 should allow us to see the first stars and galaxies as they formed great distances from here, and to study the other worlds orbiting nearby stars in our own Milky Way galaxy. One night on a 30-meter telescope would take 81 nights on the Keck telescopes and would never be done. That's just too much time. And so it will open up. This is another great leap in the journey. This is not a new idea. In fact, the National Academy of Sciences recommended that there's a priority for a 30-meter segmented mirror telescope in the year 2000. And in the year 2003, Caltech and the University of California formed a corporation called the TMT Observatory Corporation with the intent of designing and building and operating a 30-meter telescope somewhere in the world, and we eventually chose Mauna Kea as the best place to put that telescope. Since that initial phase, we've added other partners. AURA, the American Association for the University for Research in Astronomy, was an early partner. And is not now a partner, but Canada was an early partner. Then we had Japan as a later partner, China, and India. So we now have 6 partners that are part of the project. Because it's important that each partner will contribute a certain amount of money, and that amount of money is in fact differs from partner to partner, the observing time and the ownership should be scaled with how much their contribution was. If you invested 20% in the cost, then you should, in fact, get 20% of the observing time and the use of the telescope. But that meant they could not be part of TMT Corporation because that's a California corporation in which every member has the same vote. And that was not, in fact, consistent with the idea that if you contributed twice as much, you should get twice as much time. That's the reason we had to create another corporation called the TMT International Observatory, TIO. It's a Delaware corporation that allows members to have different shares in their votes. And so a 10% ownership means 10% of the observing time and 10% of the voting power. So we formed that corporation in 2014, the TMT Observatory Corporation turned over what it had developed to the TMT International Observatory, and that's now the observatory, which in fact has the sublease and has been pursuing this new part of the journey.
I know you've addressed the matter of the TMT Observatory Corporation. You know, there have been questions asked of other witnesses regarding the TMT Observatory Corporation. And I assume you're familiar with this.
Yes.
The TMT Corporation,
yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Is it a California nonprofit membership corporation? Is that correct?
Which are you talking about?
The TMT Observatory Corporation.
That's a California, yes, that's a California nonprofit.
Because you had mentioned that the LLC, the TMT International Observatory LLC, was a Delaware LLC, is that correct?
That's a Delaware nonprofit, yes. Well, the project now is, if you like, owned by TIO and is overseen by the board of TIO, and the funding comes from the various agencies and universities to TIO, to the TIO project through TIO.
Why is TMT an advancement in astronomy, you know, when we have the capability to put telescopes in space like the Hubble?
To see the dimmest objects in the universe, you need to collect a lot of light, and this is a much larger telescope than anything you can afford to put in space today. The Hubble telescope is just, I think, 2.4 meters compared to the Keck's, which are 10, and the TMT, which would be 30 meters. That's 98 feet. There's no way to launch a 98-foot mirror into space at this time. Now, perhaps someday that will happen, but today, if you want to collect that much light, you need to build it on the Earth.
Well, you know, Mauna Kea already has, you know, it's already home to the Keck telescopes, the Keck twins, which also have adaptive optics as well, correct?
Yes.
Why do we need the TMT project when we have a Keck?
Because we need because, in fact, there are objects which are too dim for even the Kecks to be able to observe. The things which are very far away, we are seeing them as they were billions of years ago when they formed, and we can see back to the beginning of stars. But in fact, with the Keck telescopes, we cannot do that effectively because they're not sensitive enough. We need to collect more light in order to see the even dimmer objects at the distant universe, and also to see the very dim planets that orbit bright stars nearby.
And what about the collecting area of the TMT as being 9 times that of the Keck?
It'd be 9 times that of Keck, which is currently the largest in the world.
So why does this make any difference in astronomy or in science?
If you want to see all the stars orbiting, for instance, this massive black hole at the center of the Milky Way galaxy, you need the improved sensitivity in order to even see the stars that are there. They're very dim, even though they're nearby in our galaxy. They're very small and very dim, and in order to see all the stars, we need to improve our sensitivity, and a factor of 81 will do that for us.
Okay, with this factor of 81, explain why TMT is so revolutionary when you compare it with Keck.
It's revolutionary just mainly because of its size. It's using the same technology as the Keck's, that is a segmented mirror. It's made of hexagonal segments. There are 36 in the Keck mirror. There will be 492 hexagonal segments in the TMT mirror, so it's much, much larger. But it's the same technology as the Keck's pioneered many years ago.
Are Gordon and Betty Moore of the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation a part of the TMT Corporation or the TIO Corporation?
No.
You stated in your written direct that Mr. Moore of the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation is a major funder. Isn't that correct?
Let me back up one step.
Okay.
They're not members of the corporation, but they do have observers at our board meetings.
Is the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation a major funder of the TMT?
Yes.
When you say major, can you give us an idea of how much funding he has provided for the TMT?
I can't give you an exact number, but it's over $100 million. It's almost 200, I think.
How much money have all of the partners given? You listed them earlier. Can you tell us how much they've given?
They have committed to the observatory a certain level of funding, which amounts to about 75% the cost of the 75 to 80% of the cost.
What would that be?
That's their commitment.
The cost of what?
Cost of the telescope.
So that would be 75 or 80% of 1.4 billion?
Yes. Well, not quite, but yes, something like that.
And what are the percentages of each of the partners?
I really don't want to go into that.
Well,
I'm going to object to this line of questioning. It is beyond the scope of his direct. It's not an issue for this proceeding, and she's asking for proprietary information.
I'm sorry, but that funding should not be proprietary.
No, you're asking for percentages. That's the proprietary part.
Is the University of Hawaii a partner?
No.
Does TMT have an arrangement to give the university observing time on TMT?
Yes.
And how much observing time is that?
7.5%.
7.5%? Okay, so do you know what the percentage generally is for the majority of the observatories on Mauna Kea?
No, I don't.
You're not familiar with the 10 or 20% given by Keck or?
I'm familiar with Keck only.
And how much percentage of time is UH given?
10% in Keck 1 and 15% in Keck 2.
Okay. Why is TMT so small?
TMT is a much more expensive facility.
Objection, Your Honor. We will stipulate that TMT is small, but the relative percentages of viewing time is really not relevant, not material.
And is it your understanding that the university does not itself collect any of the rent? Like, for example, the $1 million that you were referring to. Who collects that rent? Or who do you have to give it to?
I think the rent, some of it goes to the Office of Mauna Kea Management, and some of it goes to OHA.
And how much goes to OHA?
20%, that's my recollection.
Are you aware that Judge Nakamura of the Third Circuit Court has vacated the BLNR's consent to the TMT sublease?
Yes.
Are you aware that he ruled that a contested case hearing was required prior to the board's decision?
I have not seen the written, so I would say no, we're not really aware of what the judgment really has been.
Have you been in contact with the Gordon Moore Foundation, the TMT's largest donor, about the legal limbo that TMT has found itself in now?
They are certainly aware.
Okay. Is the board now reconsidering its choice of Hawaii as a site?
Our stated position continues to be what it has been for this year, and that is that Mauna Kea remains our preferred site, but we have a plan now to start construction on a mountain in April of 2018, and in order to give us some assurance that that can happen, we now have a plan B that we're working to develop.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a drop-dead date for when you will make that decision?
Well, we have to do it in a time so that we can begin construction in April 2018.
Okay. You state on page 4 of your written direct that TIO members have agreements, budgets, and plans for funding the construction phase of the $1.4 billion project, but you do not cite funding for operations and maintenance. Can you tell us what funding has been received from the NSF, National Science Foundation, and what funds from NSF are expected or anticipated in the future?
First of all, I don't know what I don't say anything about operations, do I, in my testimony?
No, you don't.
So you suggest. So anyway, the point is the agreement we have with our partners includes their share of operations. So if they're a 10% partner, they will be 10% of the operations cost. So it's not, their funding is tied together. All of that has been part of the company agreement.
Okay. Do you anticipate asking for NSF funds for operation and maintenance in the future?
We have a cooperative agreement to prepare a plan for that, for them to consider at some point.
So may I ask you, since these are public documents, is it true that you've already received $18 million and continue to receive funds of $1.2 million over a 5-year period from NSF?
Yes, that's, in fact, we covered the first of those already.
Okay. There was a Scientific American article in December 2015 entitled Telescope Wars, and it describes the competition for funding between 3 competing telescopes. Are you familiar with the article?
In general, I'm familiar with the issues anyway, let's put it that way.
One of the astronomers quoted said that if there had been 2 telescopes competing for funds instead of 3, both might be nearing completion at the cost of hundreds of millions of dollars less. Do you agree with that assessment?
No, I can't agree with that.
Okay, and that article goes on to say, and I'm asking if this is true, they are still searching for an additional $270 million. The project's current best guess for its telescope debut is sometime in the early 2020s. So is it true, Dr. Stone, that they're still looking for another $270 million?
For TMT? Mm-hmm. Yes, we as I said, we do have still room for an additional partner.
Okay, an additional partner, I see.
Or partners. That's, once we have a site, then we can address that remaining partnership.
I'd like to bring you to attention 2 documents that are not yet offered into evidence. It's an online article published in Nature, and the title of that is Mega Telescopes Look for Support.
Read it.
Okay.
Ellis says that NSF backing would help the TMT to nail down other partner nations, especially China, which wants to see U.S. government action before it commits completely. He adds that even if the NSF lacks money for construction, it could become a partner by paying operating expenses later on, and holding a competition might compel the agency to find money in the future. The NSF has to rise to the challenge of lobbying for facilities, says Ellis. It has been too passive.
Do you find that that statement was a true statement, that you would be, that the TMT or the TIO would be seeking to become a partner later by paying operating expenses later on?
That's one possibility.
How much do you expect that you would be seeking?
Well, that really will depend on where the site is. So until we get a site, it's hard to actually have the final numbers that we would be dealing with.
Would you be pursuing NSF funds if you were to build in the Canary Islands?
That would certainly be a possibility.
Okay. So it doesn't matter whether it's built on domestic soil or international soil?
No, NSF does run Gemini South in Chile, runs the ALMA, the NSF share of the ALMA project in Chile. Mm-hmm. So it does have facilities other than the U.S.
Okay. In terms of decommissioning, I'm going to go on to another section. On page 4 of your testimony, you say the facility, if permitted, might begin its useful life in 2027. And on page 5 of your testimony, that the TMT will be decommissioned at the end of its useful life. Are you aware that the general lease for Mauna Kea Science Reserve expires in 2033?
Yes.
Do you have any reason to be confident that an extension of the general lease would give the TMT an option of continuing beyond the expiration date?
That will be an issue which the members will have to address when they decide on the site.
Mr. Sanders said in the last contested case hearing that decommissioning would take as long as 5 years. Do you consider that an accurate statement?
It's a reasonable estimate.
Okay. Would you say that in the event that the general lease is not extended, the decommissioning would begin in 2027, the same year the facility would begin its useful life?
I think that it would, in fact, not begin, but the plan there has to be a plan 5 years before, I believe.
Okay.
This is an issue which the board will have to address when they choose the site.
I understand the board has chosen its site already, back in 2009.
But it does not have a site at this time. It has to make a decision between Hawaii and the Canary Islands.
Mm-hmm.
That's a decision it has to make.
Well, the board has expended a lot of money in Hawaii so far. Did they consider the general lease expiration in their
Yes,
decision?
that was part of our discussion when we chose the site in the first place.
Okay. The TMT website once described the TMT as a pilot for a 100-meter telescope. That statement has been since removed from the website. But can you tell us a little bit about whether this is actually a pilot for a 100-meter?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And can you explain whether the James Webb Telescope in space will, when that is deployed, whether that will be larger or more effective than the 30-meter?
It will be different than the 30-meter telescope. Being in space, it's a 6.5-meter mirror instead of 30 meters, so you can see the size is quite a bit smaller, and the amount of area to collect light is smaller, and the angular resolution is not as good as for the TMT.
Now, you testified that you are going to start construction in April of 2018, is that correct?
Correct.
Do you have any estimate as to how long construction will take?
I think we said 2027 in my testimony.
I see.
Well, that would be when we would have first light.
I see. Okay, you've also mentioned decommissioning in your testimony, I believe.
Yes.
Do you know that 5 years before the sublease that you are trying to get terminates, that you have to file a notice of intent? Yes.
We intend to ask for an extension of the lease. If we don't
Okay.
get it, then we will have to initiate decommissioning.
Now, the sublease allows TIO to terminate upon 6 months' notice. Are you familiar with that provision?
Yes.
And it also allows a period of time if the master lease is not extended that TIO can deal directly with the state of Hawaii rather than the University of Hawaii to see if it can get a better deal.
I know we have some sort of provision like that. I'm not familiar with exactly what it says.
Now, there is a rent schedule set up in the sublease, and if TIO exercises its right to cancel upon 6 months' notice, will that rent schedule also be terminated?
Yes.
And will the benefits package to the Hawaii charities also be terminated?
I believe that's the case.
Now, with respect to the Chinese member, what component of this observatory are they providing by way of component part?
They are providing some of the mirrors. There will be segments we polished. They're providing, let's see, what else is it they're providing? There is the possibility they will provide a laser, which is used for our adaptive optics system, and they're also looking at providing one of the larger mirrors.
And these mirrors will be polished elsewhere?
The one, they will do some polishing, they will do some figuring on the segments, and the other mirror, the single mirror they're delivering, they will polish.
And I know they've asked you a lot of questions about Section 106 consultation. You understand that that consultation is not only with Native organizations, but also with all other federal agencies, including Homeland Security and Customs.
Oh, yes.
has TIO undertaken to consult with these two federal agencies in terms of what it proposes to import from China by way of its component contributions?
We have had such discussions in Washington.
So we can assume there was some consultation with other federal agencies.
There were other federal agencies which were involved, yes.
And these parts, are they going to be dropped off here or sent somewhere else before they come here when they emanate from China?
That I don't know.
So let me go to the Canary Islands for just a second here. You've selected the Canary Islands, or the TIO board has selected the Canary Islands as a possible alternative site to Mauna Kea, correct?
Correct.
And to your knowledge, does that site in the Canary Islands face issues similar to the issues raised in the Keystone Center report about Hawaii?
No.
Does that alternate site provide a location for a state-of-the-art 30-meter telescope?
Yes.
Does that alternative site foster academic and scientific interaction among educational and other research institutions on a global basis?
Yes.
Does that alternate site provide a location for a much more advanced and powerful ground-based observatory than currently exists?
Yes.
Is it true that the Canary Islands in Spain are already home to telescopes, including the Gran Telescopio Canarias, which, with a primary mirror of 10.4 meters across, is one of the largest operating in the world?
Yes.
If the TMT is located at the Canary Islands site, will the TMT be able to leverage the capabilities of existing observatories at that site?
Possibly.
If the TMT is located at the Canary Islands site, will the scientific productivity of the existing telescopes at that site be increased by the co-location of a next generation observatory such as TMT?
Possibly.